Your fiancé just told everyone you're not good enough for her. Are you really going to let that slide? Those were the words I heard from one of her co-workers before the truth even reached me. Words sharp enough to split open a future I thought was already set in stone. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to Family Tales by Ethan so you never miss out on these fascinating true stories. And let us know in the comments what you're watching today. It happened on a gray Thursday morning, the kind where the sky feels heavy, like it already knows something is coming. Madison, my fiancée, stood in the kitchen of our apartment in Brooklyn, twisting her engagement ring as if it were burning her. She didn't ease into the conversation. She didn't even offer the pretense of small talk. She just breathed in, steady and rehearsed, and said, "My friends think you're not good enough for me. We should call off the wedding." Just like that. No tremble. No hesitation. No softness. I remember staring at her, not out of shock, but out of a strange, unexpected calm. Maybe because I'd seen it coming long before she spoke the words aloud. Maybe because you can only ignore cracks for so long before you finally admit the foundation was already broken. "All right," I replied. "It's up to you." Her eyes widened, almost offended that I didn't crumble at her feet. Perhaps she expected an argument, or a declaration of love, or some dramatic plea that would make her feel important enough to reject. But I didn't have any of that left in me. The months leading up to that moment had drained me dry. That same day, after she closed the door behind her, I opened my laptop and canceled the Cartier rings I'd spent weeks saving for. Then I called the travel agent and switched our Paris honeymoon to a solo trip. The deposits were painful to lose, but the relief was priceless. It's strange how silent an apartment can feel after a decision like that. Not lonely, just quiet in a way that makes you finally hear your own thoughts. But to explain how we ended up there, I need to go back. When Madison and I met 3 years earlier, we were both working at a corporate office in Manhattan. I was in accounting. She worked in HR. Our meet cute wasn't cinematic. It was a coffee machine exploding espresso across the counter at 8:17 on a Tuesday morning. I jumped back, she laughed, and somehow we found ourselves eating lunch together that same afternoon. She had this warmth back then, a softness that made you believe that ordinary moments could become something more. We started small dates, street tacos, late-night movies, parks, museums when tickets were free. She didn't need fancy things. She didn't care about brands. She didn't measure life by how shiny it looked. At least, not then. 2 years later, we were engaged. We planned a small wedding, quiet and meaningful, just family and a handful of friends. I put down a deposit for the Cartier rings because I wanted something lasting, something that would mark our beginning the right way. I thought it mattered to her too. But people change, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. When Madison was promoted to HR lead, everything shifted. Suddenly, she was in a new circle. Managers who discussed bonus brackets like weekend plans, co-workers comparing designer heels and luxury condos as if they were groceries. And Madison absorbed it all. That world didn't just influence her, it consumed her. The comparisons started as jokes, then preferences, then expectations, and eventually, quiet disappointments directed at me. Our friends all live in nicer neighborhoods. Everyone's planning elaborate weddings now. Maybe we should hire a luxury planner instead of the one you suggested. Or the one that hit the hardest. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one putting effort into our image. Our image. I didn't even know love could be downgraded to branding until she said it. I chalked it up to stress, pressure, work, social comparison. I tried harder instead of speaking up. I took on extra projects at work, saved more, stayed late, said yes to almost everything she wanted, hoping she'd feel secure enough to return to the version of herself she'd once been. But the more she planned the wedding, the less it felt like ours. It became her showcase, her proof to her friends that she belonged in that glittering world. I was just the fiancé filling a space in her curated aesthetic. Her new friends didn't help. They whispered, compared, criticized quietly behind glasses of wine at rooftop brunches. I didn't fit their mold. Wrong income bracket, wrong car, wrong apartment, wrong everything. I didn't know it then, but they were chipping away at her view of me piece by piece. Things only worsened after she attended a co-worker's birthday dinner at a high-end restaurant, the kind that prints menus without prices. I couldn't go because of a work deadline. When she came home that night, the glow she used to have after nights out with friends had been replaced by something hollow, something calculating, something distant. The next morning, at that same kitchen table where we once argued over which honeymoon pastry shop to visit first, she told me her decision. Her friends thought I wasn't good enough, and she wasn't sure they were wrong. I remember looking at her hands as she spoke. The same hands I once imagined holding during our vows now looked unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone I no longer knew. "Do you think I'm not good enough?" I asked. She hesitated. A long, telling silence. Then whispered, "Maybe." And that was all the closure I needed. I rinsed my coffee mug, set it in the sink, and said quietly, "I'll cancel everything tonight." Hours later, as I clicked cancel order on the Cartier email and changed the Paris tickets to one traveler, I realized something. I wasn't losing her. I was getting myself back. For the first time in months, the air in my apartment felt breathable. That night, after everything was officially canceled, the apartment felt heavier than it ever had. Not because Madison was gone, but because the silence finally had room to settle. I sat on the couch, staring at the Paris confirmation email, now updated for one traveler, and realized how strange it was that a future I'd spent years imagining could disappear with just a few clicks. The next evening, Madison came by to pick up some of her things. She stepped inside cautiously, like she expected chaos. Maybe she imagined overturned furniture, shattered frames, signs of a man falling apart. But everything was exactly as she'd left it. Too neat, too calm, too normal for what was supposed to be heartbreak. "I didn't think you'd actually cancel everything," she said quietly. "You said it was over," I replied. "I'm just respecting that." She flinched, almost as if the calmness hurt more than anger. "You don't even want to talk about it? What's left to say?" She hesitated as if trying to assemble the version of the breakup she'd imagined. "I just thought that. I thought you'd fight for this." I looked at her, truly looked, and finally understood the mismatch between us. She wasn't asking for love. She was asking for validation. For drama. For proof that she mattered enough to cause a scene. "Madison," I said softly, "I cared so much I forgot to take care of myself. I tried so hard to fit into the version of love you started wanting. The version built on status and opinions instead of honesty and us." I shook my head. "But that's not who I am." She lowered her gaze, mascara slightly smudged. For the first time, she looked small, like someone who finally realized that losing someone quietly can hurt more than any shouting match ever could. "They thought you wouldn't handle it well," she whispered. "They were wrong," I told her. When she left, the door clicked shut with a softness that felt final. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and watched the city lights blur through the window. Somewhere in the hum of nighttime traffic, a strange sense of freedom began to unfold. Not happiness yet, but space. And space, I was starting to learn, was the first step to healing. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message. I expected it to be Madison. Instead, it was her friend, Chloe, the same Chloe who'd once tossed around phrases like, "not good enough," without even blinking. Her message was simple. "Hey, I heard about what happened. I'm really sorry. You deserve better." I didn't respond. Not out of rudeness, but because I didn't know what to do with the irony. These were the same people who whispered judgment into Madison's ear, and now they suddenly pitted me. For the first time in months, I smiled, not bitterly, but with clarity. Maybe silence was my revenge. Or maybe the real revenge was simply not needing one. A week later, I boarded the plane to Paris alone. The moment the wheels lifted off the runway, I felt something shift inside me, something that had been clenched tight since the day Madison first compared our modest apartment to her co-worker's luxury condo. Paris wasn't supposed to be a solo trip, but in a strange way, it felt like it always should have been. The first few days, I wandered through quiet streets, letting the rhythm of the city carry me. I drank espresso in cafes that overlooked the Seine, visited small bookstores tucked between bakeries, and walked until my legs ached. I didn't feel lonely. I felt private, as if the city was lending me its anonymity so I could rebuild myself quietly. Sometimes, at night, I scrolled through old photos of us. The smiles, the plans, the softness that had once felt so real. But every time I did, I noticed something new, subtle signs I'd ignored. The way she checked her phone at dinner, the distracted look in her eyes when I talked about simple things, the carefully curated poses she insisted on for pictures. Little things that, in hindsight, weren't little at all. On the third night, I posted a picture on Instagram, a coffee cup and a view of the river. I didn't think much of it. But an hour later, a message appeared. It was Madison. I've been thinking a lot. I was wrong. I stared at the screen, feeling a strange mix of sadness and distance. Apologies always come easier when someone realizes you're no longer chasing them. I didn't reply. A few days later, while I was sitting at a cafe near Saint Germain, my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hey, it's Chloe. The last voice I expected to hear. What's going on? I asked. I heard you were in Paris, she said awkwardly. I didn't think you'd actually take the trip. Why wouldn't I? I don't know. Most guys would have fallen apart after what happened. I did, I said. Just quietly. She laughed, soft and a little nervous. You sound different. Happier, even. Maybe peace sounds like happiness. There was a pause, long enough for her to choose her next words carefully. Not everyone agreed with what Madison did, she said. Some of us thought she made a huge mistake. Some of you. Okay, me. I leaned back in the chair, letting her confession sink in. There it was, the twist no one asked for. She's been a mess, Chloe continued. She keeps saying she thought you'd fight for her. She didn't think you were serious. I think she regrets everything. I didn't say anything. Then Chloe's tone shifted, softer, undeniably flirtatious. Honestly, she added, I always thought you were kind of amazing. You just have this calmness about you. I exhaled slowly. Chloe, are you calling because you're worried about me? Or because you want to know if I'm still single? There was a breathy laugh on the other end. Maybe both. And that was the moment something clicked. Not resentment, not anger, but clarity so sharp it felt like stepping into sunlight after months of rain. The people who once said I wasn't enough were suddenly circling back, drawn not to who I was before, but to the quietness I found afterward. When the call ended, I stayed in the cafe for a long time, watching the sky fade into dusk. The same shimmered. Conversations floated around me. And somewhere between the last sip of espresso and the fading daylight, I realized I didn't need anyone's validation. Not Madison's, not her friends, not even Chloe's. Walking away had been the loudest thing I'd ever done. Paris changed me in ways I didn't notice at first. The longer I stayed, the more I stopped reaching for my phone, the more I stopped replaying conversations, the more I realized how little of myself I'd allowed to breathe during those last months with Madison. I visited museums I'd only seen in books, sketched street performers along the bridges, and got lost in neighborhoods where no one knew my name. For the first time in years, I felt like my life wasn't something I needed to defend or justify. It simply existed, and that was enough. By the second week, the city felt less like an escape and more like a recalibration. Every quiet evening, every slow walk along the river, every chance encounter with strangers felt like a small reminder. I didn't need to chase anyone's approval to have worth. When I finally returned home, my apartment looked exactly the same, yet it felt different. Not haunted, not empty, just free. The wedding invitations were still stacked neatly on the counter, the blank photo frames still waiting for a future that had dissolved. Instead of tossing them out in bitterness, I packed them away gently, realizing they belonged to a life I'd almost lived. And I wasn't angry about it. If anything, I was grateful I hadn't stepped into something built on insecurity and comparison. A few days after I unpacked, Madison called again. Her voice was smaller this time, like someone speaking through a crack in the door. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she murmured. You didn't deserve what happened. I listened, not interrupting. I thought I was doing the right thing, she continued. My friends kept saying things, and I let them get into my head. I let them make me feel like what we had wasn't enough. But now I see they were just jealous. Jealous of how real it was. I sighed, not out of exhaustion, not out of anger, but out of understanding. Madison, I said quietly, I don't hate you. But I can't go back to something that fell apart because other people spoke louder than your own heart. There was a long pause. I really hope you're happy, she whispered. I am, I answered. And for the first time, I meant it without hesitation. Life didn't magically fix itself after that call. But it did settle, slowly, naturally, like dust drifting back to the ground after a long storm. Work picked up again. My routines became steady. I joined a gym, met new people, and tried things I'd put off for far too long. I learned to cook more than the 3 meals I'd lived on for years. I bought myself a nicer camera and spent weekends wandering around the city, capturing little pieces of life that felt honest and unfiltered. Then one night, everything shifted in a way I couldn't have predicted. It was at a small art gallery downtown. Nothing fancy, just a local display, dim lights, soft music, and the hum of quiet conversations. I went because I had no other plans, because it was close to my apartment, because I was finally learning to say yes to myself. And that's where I met her. Her name was Lila. She was standing in front of a painting of a quiet lake at dusk, head tilted slightly, eyes softened in a way that suggested she wasn't just looking, she was feeling. We ended up talking for nearly an hour before we even realized it. About books, about travel, about the strange ways people lose themselves trying to keep up with expectations. She didn't care about brands or social status. She didn't talk about who had the better apartment or job title. She cared about ideas, stories, the things that made people human. And the way she laughed, unfiltered, real, felt like something I'd forgotten was possible. Walking home that night, I realized something important. Madison wasn't the villain of my story. She was just someone who got lost in the noise, the pressure, the endless race to impress people who weren't even watching. And maybe I had gotten lost too, trying to hold on to someone who wasn't holding on to herself. But Paris had taught me that walking away isn't always a failure. Sometimes it's the bravest, kindest thing you can do for yourself. A week later, on my way to work, I passed by the Cartier store downtown. The display window hadn't changed much, soft lighting, velvet displays, rings that sparkled like quiet promises. Inside, a couple stood at the counter, laughing softly as they compared two wedding bands. Their faces glowed with the kind of hope I used to know, the kind that feels invincible, untouched by doubts or outside voices. For a moment, I stood there just watching them. Not because I missed it, but because I finally understood it. That ring, the one I'd canceled with a shaky sigh, had never been meant for Madison. It wasn't even meant for the relationship we had. It was meant for the man I was still becoming. The one who finally understood his worth, not because someone affirmed it, but because he reclaimed it. I walked away from the window with my hands in my pockets, a soft smile pulling at my lips. The sky overhead was clear, the air crisp, and for the first time in what felt like years, nothing felt heavy. Sometimes, I thought, the most beautiful endings are the ones that lead you back to yourself. And this time, I wasn't running from heartbreak or chasing closure. I was just living. Quietly. Steadily. Fully.